like Andrew said, I'm Chui Chui Tan. You can call me Chui Chui because that's my first name, or you can call me Chui. But please try not to call me Chui Tan. Because, two reasons I bring it up. Because firstly, Chui Chui is my first name and Tan is my last name. And living in the UK, people often think the second one is middle name. So it actually bothers me quite a lot when people call me Chui Tan. And secondly, the reason for that is this is what the talk is all about. It's about understanding what cultural differences and what other people think and what people need and what is important to other people as well, and understanding why. So apart from authoring International User Research, which is a small pocket book, and also editor of Smashing Magazine, which I'm sure you guys heard about it, my main focus is actually running Beyō Global, which aim to empower businesses to create and design a great experience for their customers, regardless where they are in the world. The reason for that is because what is a great experience for British, for example, or Americans, might not be a great experience for Russians or Japanese or Mexicans. But ultimately, I'm a firm believer of applying pragmatic approach to research. That means that we always aim to convert stories and insights that we learn from different research and helps businesses to define what their business propositions are and their strategy and roadmap. So in the last 13 years, I have been working with various businesses in different industries across different continents as well, not just finding about differences between countries, but also similarities between them, because ultimately you don't want to have too many versions, and it's hard to maintain, it's hard to create and govern as well. So my background is in customer and user experience. To me, designing a good end-to-end experience without the global elements itself is a big topic. And it's a bit like, I like to use the metaphor of a cupcake. So the whole end-to-end experience without the global elements is like the base of the cupcake. You need to get it right. You need to get the fluffiness right, the level of sweetness, the flavor, and the texture as well. And to me, from my experience, the macro level of how people from different countries and different culture, they complete a task, normally is quite similar. I call that as macro level. And for example, the task model of the journey they go through when booking hotels or buying a vacuum cleaner is almost similar. For example, from the point they have the trigger, I need to go travel for work or leisure, to doing some research, comparing hotels, getting the details, booking, preparing for the trip, traveling, arriving, checking in, checking out, and post-trip. And that journey is always the same. It's kind of like a set of journey for all. However, what makes the experience good or bad for one country than the others are mainly because of the micro-level elements of the journey. For example, the requirements and needs they need, and the questions they might have, the concerns they might have, and because this is going to influence how information is going to be presented to them, what kind of information you need to present to them, and what kind of payment method they might prefer. This is another layer that you add on top of the cupcake base, the sprinkles and the toppings. So in some countries, they might share same toppings, but you need a different sprinkles. But some countries, they need completely different toppings and sprinkles. The thing is, even there are two layers, both of them has to work very well together so that you can have a very great experience as a whole. What I would like you to do now is close your eyes and imagine this. Don't worry, I won't do anything crazy. Just imagine that you are thinking about booking a hotel for a long Christmas break. You came across this company on your Facebook feed. It says package holiday. It's not what you're looking for, but the photo looks great. So you click on it anyway, and it came to their website. It seems too colorful and overwhelming for your liking. You click on the calendar to choose the dates. After clicking through the dates, you were confused. Then you realize the calendar starts on Sunday instead of Monday. which is not what you're familiar with. You read through the copy, there are a lot of copy that which doesn't make sense to you. Maybe it's the translation, you think. Finally, you found something you might be interested in. You click on it, they show you the price in Japanese yen. You can open your eyes now. So how was that experience with that website? Confusing, frustrating? And how long before you start to abandon that website? So that website might be it might be a Japanese travel company, which is very popular in Japan. But the problem is they don't know you, their British customer, what you want and what you need and what you look for. And it starts off with irrelevant marketing content to start with, bad translations, bad content, and also irrelevant content on the marketing side as well. Will you book with them? Probably not. So let's start with a product in the middle. Whatever that is, it could be a service, it could be an app or software or website. The first thing you need to do is recognize your users, which everyone here knows. But it's important to identify them as individuals, family, kids, couples, or B2B like organizations or retailers. And then once you identify them, who they are, the next step is understand them. And they could be the needs, their emotions, the journey they go through, the motivations, and their pain points and goals. And only after you understand that, then you can make the decision based on that. So earlier on, I talked about pragmatic approach, that once you do your research, you need to come up with the so what bit. So a lot of times when we work with our clients, it's kind of like, oh, this is a research and insight you get. And we help them depending on which team we work with them. We will talk about, okay, what kind of product features you need for these specific regions, or how do you change your subscription model because of the financial situations of these regions. I'll give you more examples throughout the whole conversation, the talk. But how do you know what to sprinkle on top of these cupcakes, or what toppings you should go for each market? So to me, it comes to three elements. Market research. And they're all relevant, by the way, but market research is really important and useful, but it always lacks of behavioral insights. And behavioral insights is useful because it tells you what people are doing. But for me, cultural insight is the most important because it tells you why people behave the way they behave. Because the way they behave is the reason they behave the way they behave, and then why they behave the way they behave is going to define the market insights. So let's take an example. So tanning products are very huge in Western industry, in Western countries, right? But in Asia, in a lot of Asian countries, whitening products is huge. So that is a market trend. So if you are a cosmetic company, you will need to know what kind of product you want to sell in the right countries. So what is the behavior then? So when they stand out in the Western country, you can see this. People want to get tan, right? On the other hand, in the Asian, they want to cover as much as possible. So look at this lady here. It's that kind of like fear of missing out, but also fear of getting tan. So that is kind of behavior. They want to get tan or fair as much as possible, hence the tanning and whitening products. But what is the cultural insights that are causing that kind of behavior? It might have to go back to the history like 1,000 years ago. In Asian world, it might be the case that when you have fair skin, it means that you're actually quite well off and rich, that you didn't have to work under the sun in the paddy fields or anything like that. So you are rich, you can have prestige level of that. In fact, there's a saying in Mandarin called 一丑遮三丑, which is white skin. If you have white skin, it will cover at least 3 types of your ugliness on your face. Whereas in the Western country, maybe the cultural insight is because the whole nation have the belief that when you are tan, it means that you have money and you are off to go on holiday out of these cold countries. So there's always a trigger that make people behave the way they behave and attitude towards that. Another example, in a yoga class, I always hear the teacher was saying, the instructor was saying, oh, if you can't do this pose, try, it's okay. And I just like, how hard is this pose? Like, why is it so hard? And have you tried squatting? Well, for those that are not Asian, have you squatting like that before, like properly? You can try that later on. And it turned out a lot of my friends, and British friends or Western friends can't do that. But why is it so easy for Asians? Because we are trained to do that since we're young. Since you are 2 or 1.5, you start to do that. So it's always there's elements, small or big scale, elements that make you behave the way you how we behave in our nature as well. So it's really, really important to understand this. Otherwise, you might just design following. I might move on from these toilets again. So you might want to understand that so that you don't following what people is doing now and just copying everyone's what they're doing. So you understanding why people behave, and then you can find innovations out of that, or you can say, oh, there's a gap. We can see this is coming in the future. So you can be prepared of that. So when we talk about cultural differences, especially relevant to design on website, there are a lot of models out there. So one of the most famous one is this one. Anyone recognize this? No? Yeah, Andrew does. I tried to pronounce it right, and now it's my turn. I think it's here's Hofstadter, cultural dimensions. How many of you have used this or heard of this? So apart from you, so quite a few of you. We'll be interested to hear what your experience was. So they have 5 dimensions, and then start to add another 1, 6. So if you search online, you can see a lot of people talk about these different models, and then they say, oh, how people use this model to create a website. And they always use a typical website, choose a website, for example, McDonald's websites. Seems like everyone chooses McDonald's website as example to say, okay, take 2 countries, website from 2 countries, and then come up with a rationale behind why they behave, why they design in such a way. So, for example, this is one of the articles out there which use this model. They say they take Turkish and US website as example, and they say one of them has a higher is more collectivist society. So Turkish is collectivist society. Hence, they have all these features like the visual of the cook, and then have mobile app. They have reviews, which more collectivist behaviors. Whereas for the US, they're more individualistic. So they say, okay, the reason for that, that's why they redesign with the call to actions, very individual decisions making. But how true is that? Did McDonald's team really design based on this model, or actually use this as a reference? Hold that thought. I want to ask a question. So this is another McDonald's site for Norwegian users. And Norwegians is a very high masculinity countries. So what are the design elements that you can tell me that just shout out that show masculinity?
Beef, wood.
Very beef, wood. What else? Brown. Yep, the color is quite strong. Great. I might have tricked you. It's actually a high femininity society. I'm sorry. But that's what I'm trying to say as well, is that, it's very easy to take a model and say, okay, this is how people design. But it's quite easy to kind of make very general assumptions. I did a workshop before and asked people, say, oh, this is a UK website, and this is a scores for China and UK, designed for the China website. And it's just like, I don't really know how to design a website, like knowing the scores is more masculinity or more individualistic and things like that. So it somehow can actually, people feedback saying design this way could be quite sexist or racist and very stereotyping as well. I'm not scrutinizing this or criticizing this model. They are very useful as a model, as a reference. If you don't know much about a society, this will be a good way to understand them. But just using them purely by using this model to decide your design and also to create your business proposition, that is very dangerous. Ultimately, you still have to go out and listen to your customers as well. So we talk about cultural different insights that are important, but culture is a big word. What is culture? How do you define it? Do do you divide it based on continents, like Asian culture versus African? Or do you do that based on countries? But for someone like me who actually born and grew up in Malaysia, brought up in the Chinese customs and tradition because my grandparents from Taiwan, but live in the UK for 16 years. Which country do I belong to? My mentality, my needs, and everything else doesn't belong to one country anymore. Or do you say it's based on culture, based on language? Is that mother tongues? Or actually based on ethnic groups like colors and races? I personally don't think we need to define it that way. Instead, we should see what culture actually consists of. To me, these are elements that actually define a society, shape how a society evolves, and how they form together. I call them influences. It could be the politics, it could be the history, it could be the gene and the environment. These are the things that's going to form the culture, how people behave and attitudes. And so when you design a new website, you don't think about just language, but you also want to think about the ecosystem. That, for example, like the economy, how that changed people's attitudes toward money, the trust in terms of providing that information. So the question is where to start to design. There are 3 steps to me. First is to get the fundamental right. Can anyone come up with, tell me what is the similarities, what are the one thing that this company shared? Got the name and logo. That's my presentation, yeah. 2. So I'm going to go review that. So all these countries actually had been warned, or actually their website in China has been banned for a week, or demanded apologies because all of them have been accidentally put Taiwan, Macau, Tibet, and Hong Kong as countries, as opposed to regions. So that is kind of geopolitical issues or mistake you can't afford to do. So that is fundamental. The other example is Food Basics. It's a grocery stores. They have 115 stores in Ontario, in Canada. They want to kind of promote their products to ethnic groups, the Sikh community. So they kind of come out with these flyers to promote their products on one of the Sikh religious holidays called Baisakhi. But if the company and the marketing team knows more about the Sikh community, they wouldn't have created this. 2 reasons. Actually, Sikhs do not consume meat and alcohol during Baisakhi. So there's meat up there. And then secondly is halal food is actually forbidden for practicing Sikh. Sometimes they actually feel insulted being offered. So that is, again, is cultural insensitivity as well. You can't get that right, wrong, because then your business can go down very quick and easy. Another quick exercise, if you have pen and pencil or in your head, you think about how you go about, I want you to design an icon for Asians dining to represent that. And then all you need is a bowl of rice, or a bowl, and the noodles. A quick one in your head is fine as well. How many of you have drawn these similar things? Yeah? It's pretty simple and pretty, right? What can you go wrong with a bowl and a chopstick? But you could, because in Asian culture, if you put your chopstick straight in a bowl, it means that you are actually serving to dead people. So you kind of don't want to get that wrong as well, because that could be offensive. So that is for the fundamental. What is for the basic then, second level? So designing, a lot of people talk about the basic is the language, right? Translating and localizing, but there are so much more than that. I'm not going into that because translations and localization is another topic. But other things are basics for names, like we talk about. You don't want to assume the second name is middle name, or some first name and last name. Some countries is from last name first and then first name after. You want to get your fields right so that you actually address them in the right way. Some names are very long in some countries, or they have special characters as well. So you need to make sure your design and your forms design would cater for that. This gets really wrong. Even my title is wrong, my first name is wrong, my last name is wrong. This is a hotel in Paddington. Apart from name, what else? Like numbers, you thought it's quite easy, but there are so many variations as well for different countries. How about currency display? How about dates? So there are a lot of ways, a lot of things that actually you have to consider. And you might thought these are actually small elements, like why would you worry about that? But actually it will convert it will have a big impact on your conversions. And sometimes it's not just about design, small elements, or actually big strategies. Sometimes it's about practical and functional as well, like payment method. In Germany, you don't use credit card as much, but PayPal is big. But in Poland, which is close to Germany, they don't use PayPal, they use credit card. And in Japan, you can actually pay a lot cash in convenience shops like 7-Eleven, and even for domestic flights or hotels. And Latin America, they might expect you to have installment even with small amounts. So all these things, you need to cater for that as well. So these are the basics. I do believe you can do secondary research to find out, although you need to spend a lot of time to validate them and everything else. And then the next step is details. Do you know what movie is that? Yes, Pixar, Inside Out. Can you see any difference between the two? Come on. Different vegetables, right. So one is a general version that you see, the broccoli ones, and then the other one is Japan one. The reason for that is they realize actually Japanese kids love broccoli. They don't find it disgusting. So they ask, what is disgusting for you? And they say, green pepper. So they changed that. It's not just that, but actually there are a lot of, there are actually 48 individual shots that actually have been localized in Pixar Inside Out. So this one is soccer and hockey that you see different versions. I'm going to skip that. So another example of what can be the detail is like years ago we do BMJ, which is British Medical Journal, that we provide the contents to the British as well as to Japanese. And the European participants see the articles, they will talk about, what are the citations and references? But then if you show the same article to Japanese or Asians, the question they ask is, who else actually cited the same paper, and what does my peer think about that? So showing them the same content might actually create a different questions they might have. And so you can create as many hypotheses as you can about a country, right? Using the models, using what you have for perceptions. But you always want to go out and see how people use your products or how people complete a task. So these examples, I went to Qatar years ago for Ritz-Carlton. So we want to understand what people do, how people go about booking hotels. So we saw two participants walk in. It's just that we just ordered one. So why they have two? So it turns out that they walk together, and then the guys on the right actually stop, and then the guys on the other ones that just pull the chair and let him sit. And turns out he was his assistant. This is how they book hotels. He will sit back and look at him clicking and scrolling, and then he will come and say this one, and then he will click, and then he will say no, that one. So that is how they book. And if we didn't go out and see that, we wouldn't have understand that kind of way of research as well. So when I was in Japan, last year, but was for two projects. Two clients, one is Spotify and B2C, and one is for Asana. Even though I went out just to, it's the same ultimate, same aim, right? We wanted to help them to understand their customers and their markets, their ecosystem for their products. But actually, they are pretty different. Because for Asana, because it's a work management tool, what we wanted to find out is thinking about the organization culture, like hierarchical society like Japanese. What does that mean to a work management tool? And what does that mean to Asana? Or, consensus decisions making is very important. How do we go about making decisions, and how do that affect a use of a management tool? And the other thing is personal communication is very important. And what does that mean? People actually can't just assign tasks to each other. You need to go and talk to them first and make sure they're happy with that, they are free, and da-da-da. And so it's a lot of all these different cultural elements organization cultural elements that you need to find out. But all these things doesn't really it's not really important or relevant to Spotify. So even though you go out to a country, it doesn't mean it actually has to be related to your industry as well to see, okay, what are the things that you can bring in to understand the cultural differences and then prop more into it while you go and do the research itself. So that is the detail, the in-depth research. So in that part, you can hardly do that on secondary research because your users might be slightly different from your competitors as well, or in other industries as well. You might need to get help or support from experts in that sense. So some of you might think, well, this is not really relevant to me really because my company I'm working with at the moment is just in the UK. But whether you like it or not, you are global because whether your products are in the UK or other countries, people from different ethnic groups or countries will be using your product or services. Whether when they are in the UK or outside, they will find a way to use their products. So be open-minded. So this is the 3 levels of culturalizations I created where I talk about the 3 levels that you need to get the fundamental right, nail the fundamental, get the basic right, and then focus on the details. And this is a journey that will get you to be stand out in the crowd and to be top of the ladder. So enjoy your journey in designing the best experience you could have for your global audiences. That's me. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Okay, we've got time for a couple of questions. Does anybody who... Oh, I've got loads, so I don't want to... Who's got some questions? I can't see any hands. Seriously, no? Oh, thank you. There we are. Okay.
Hiya. I'm curious to know at which point your clients engage you to understand their global audiences before they decide to go into the market or after they've been operating there for a while. What is the common kind of pattern?
It's a mixture of both. So depending on where they are in their process, some of them they haven't even have a product, like startup that I work with via venture capitalists, that they don't have a product. They know they need to go in the future to go globally. They need to start having a global mindset to start with. Otherwise, it's too late once they kind of, I have this product for UK, and then, oops, it doesn't work. It can't adapt to globally. So they sometimes come to us even at the very beginning. Or sometimes they're already in a market, and like I work with Spotify a lot, and some countries, they're already there, they just want to further understand, and if I work with the market product team, growth team, then it's more about, okay, what kind of features we need to create for these different countries. If I work with premium or premium team or conversion team, then they will think about the next step, like subscriptions and things like that. But even Spotify, they have growth team that I went out when they haven't gone out to that countries yet. They might be launching next year or next 2 years. So it's a mixture of everything. So normally I would ask them where they are and what the objectives, which team I'm working with, and then kind of like created that approach so that we can answer the questions ultimately for them.
Thank you. I think there was a question. We've got 2 on this side.
I was just wondering if you have a website that, because it exists online and you know that some of your audiences are international, but you may not have the resources to I guess, create that bespoke topping for each one. And is Google Translate enough, or do you need to actually translate some of your content for those key foundation pages to be able to speak to those type of audiences? How, I guess, have you experienced that, and do you have any recommendations?
So are you specifically talking about the translation for your products, or actually translations so that you can bring out your material to test to the participants?
I guess, so I work in a gallery, and so our audiences could be from America, Europe, or Asia. And so it's, one, partly how do we give the information for those core users to come visit us. And then the other added problem is then how do we actually test with those people as well? so we can make sure that the information that we are providing is actually useful.
So if you have low budget as well, because it's a gallery in London, let's say, then you might not need to actually approach people outside the country. So because there are so many tourists or people who are visiting their kids here. You know, like a lot of representatives that you can test here already, that you can go stay in the gallery and then ask kind of guerrilla research kind of with them. In terms of translation as well, like, yeah, of course you need to translate. I wouldn't trust Google Translate completely. No offense, it's good, but sometimes they don't pick up the context as well. So you might want to get, if it is just a few pages you want to test, and then you can Google Translate and then get someone local who is in your team or who know a bit about the context, or you can explain to them about the context and then they can translate for you. Or use a translation agency who actually specify in that area, which is better. Because sometimes even translation company, they translate without knowing the area, that might actually mistranslate as well. There you go. Fiverr.com, there's a website that you can get cheap efforts, resources that you can help you in translating maybe.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you. My name is Henrik. Wanted to ask you if there are any markets or regions that you feel are particularly difficult to pick up if you do not properly address them culturally. Are there any markets that you feel are particularly difficult to address, or feel like if you don't properly do it, that you really won't have an impact on the market?
You mean when you're doing research, they don't tell you exactly what they think, or?
Yeah, or not more specifically, if I have a product and I want to launch it globally, and I do not do my research properly, are there any parts of the world where you feel like my product will fail more than others because I didn't properly address them?
It really depends on, I know people hate the word it depends, but it really depends on your industry, because some industries, some countries, you can actually know quite well and quite easily to adapt to that, but then in certain different industry, you know that countries have very, very different, like for example in China they use WeChat completely different way of how people use that, so that might be a bit different. But if you talk about, I don't know, recruitment, and then they might not be as different, but actually recruitment have big difference. But you know what I mean though, it's like certain area. So I was giving an example earlier to one of the, we were chatting. So years ago, Tesco did came and say, oh, we have 25 countries and how we can do research for everything. We don't have the money and we can't do everything. So how we group them into 4 to 5. So we kind of look into, I look into different aspects as well. So what will be influencing how we choose and group the countries. So for example, you will think about how the lifestyle in a country. So in Asian country or some countries in Middle East or Eastern Europe, people actually tend to live together, like 2 generations or 3 generations. So the way they buy grocery will be different, right, from Western countries. Or think about their view in terms of buying local food. In France, they're more strongly about that, and then in other countries they don't. Or how Tesco itself operate in different countries. So with that, so Malaysia and UK, I would mix them together in terms of how Tesco operate, but I wouldn't put them together in terms of the lifestyle, because my parents live with my brother and the kids in one house, you know, and it's weird here, right? So yeah, so you kind of group them in the different way, and then you can see. So I can't tell you this country would be harder.
Thank you. Unfortunately, is my mic on? Thank you. Unfortunately, we've run out of time, so thank you so much, Chui Chui. Thank you.
Thank
Big
you.
round of applause.